Hey guys, it's Angelo, and today I want to share a video I've been planning on doing for a longer time now, because I personally think that topics and discussions like these are very interesting and help us all to understand our spec better. Today, I want us to take a different approach at the Shadow Priest, and together we will examine why we don't actually use Void Torrent anymore, even after its buff with the recent patch. Void Torrent, previously our artifact ability in Legion, a fun-to-use, visually appealing, and spec-defining spell, has become all but obsolete in Battle for Azeroth. The reasons for this vary, and the examination of the spell will prove that the reasons we don't use Void Torrent anymore are much deeper than a simple damage output. For the sake of structure, we'll organize the video into 3 chapters: what made Void Torrent strong and essential in Legion, how the Battle for Azeroth changes affected Void Torrent, and how Void Torrent compares to its competitors in the level 90 talent row. At the end, we'll have gathered the required information to understand why Void Torrent is not used anymore, and can discuss whether or not this will change in the future. At the end of the video, be sure to let me know in the comments below whether or not you'd like to see more analysis videos like this one in the future, perhaps concerning other talents like Surrender to Madness, Fortress of the Mind, and so on. Also, if you'd want to join the discussion over on our Discord server, feel free to do so with the link in the description, of course. Good, but now, without any further ado, let's go right ahead and have a look. First, we need to have everyone on the same sheet of music. We obviously can't assume that everyone knows what Void Torrent used to do in Legion, or what it actually does now, since most Shadow Priests know that the talent is essentially not viable. Void Torrent lets you channel a torrent of void energy into your current target, dealing shadow damage over 4 seconds. During this time, your insanity does not drain, and over the 4-second duration of its channel, Void Torrent additionally generates 30 insanity. The spell is on a cooldown of 45 seconds, and is a talent in our level 90 talent row, sharing the tier with Mindbender and Lingering Insanity. Now keep these factors in mind, as they will play an important role in a few minutes when we discuss why Void Torrent struggles in its current form. In Legion, Void Torrent was a baseline spell for every Shadow Priest who had obtained our artifact weapon. It had the same effect back then, with the only differences being that it was on a 1-minute cooldown and it did not generate 30 extra insanity over its duration. Insanity drain was still interrupted during this channel though. Now, the idea behind Void Torrent has remained the same over the years of its presence. The ability serves as a way to extend your Void form by halting your insanity drain, thus giving your insanity time to recharge via your auspicious spirits, and also giving you a quicker, or rather a quick breather, while your spells come off cooldown again in order to play another clean rotation. Void Torrent can either be used at the beginning of your Void form, or at the end, and ideally you will have the spell ready once each Void form. Now, with these basics addressed, and with everyone in line with what Void Torrent is and used to be, let's take a more detailed look at why it's so weak at the moment. Now, let's examine the reality of Void Torrent in its current state. During my testing of this talent, with item level 413 equipped, 25% haste and 25.28% critical strike, I found that my Void Torrent was not ready to use each Void form, which proves to be not only a major flaw in the spell's intended philosophy for the spec, but also a vital gameplay flaw concerning the spell itself. The fact that Void Torrent is not ready for each Void form creates 2 issues. It cannot reliably be used at high stacks of Void form to give the player another shot at a clean rotation, or perhaps only a last Void Bolt at high stacks before dropping out of Void form, and in concordance with this, cannot be utilized to its intended full potential. Previously, in Legion, this issue was only present during early stages of the expansion, because we did not have the levels of haste to push Void forms long enough in order to have Void Torrent ready with each Void form. But it also has to be mentioned here that Void forms in Legion lasted much longer than they do now, because Insanity Drain was lower. Void Torrent previously also did not have the problem that it needs to be spec'd as a talent, thus forcing the player to make a choice between it and two other very lucrative options, namely Lingering Insanity and Mindbender. Void Torrent had its flaws in Legion as well, but due to the fact that it was baseline, these problems did not affect the spell itself as much as they do now. This highlights the first major flaw with Void Torrent, and not being baseline takes away a lot of its strength, as the ability was definitely constructed with the idea in mind of it being available to everyone. Good, now let's look at how Void Torrent compares to its talent competitors. As I've mentioned before, Void Torrent shares its level 90 talent tier with Lingering Insanity and Mindbender. Even though this offers beautiful diversity when it comes to which playstyle you can choose in this row, the beauty of this diversity is blocked by the fact that both Mindbender and Lingering Insanity are vastly superior to Void Torrent due to how Battle for Azeroth has changed the Shadow Priest's playstyle. During Legion, our Void forms were long, often reaching more than 40 stacks, and later on in the expansion even more than 50 or even 60 stacks. This made the cooldown of Void Torrent less hindering to the spell, as eventually the cooldown weaved in perfectly with our regular Void form uptime. In order to achieve this, however, it was important that we have important tools at hand, like Mindbender and Lingering Insanity, which were previously not in the same talent row, meaning you were able to use all three of these abilities at the same time. Void Torrent was heavily reliant on the fact that other spells supported our Void form uptime, and unfortunately this is not the case anymore. Currently, the Shadow Priest relies on short Void forms of stacks of around 30 and very short periods of not being in Void form, as with the help of various Azerite traits, we're back into our next Void form within only a few seconds. This does not give Void Torrent enough time to get off cooldown, spiraling into the problem that we can't use it for each Void form, but rather either have to wait for every other Void form or have to actually use it while we are not in Void form. This sometimes means that it gets off cooldown at a comparably bad time, however, again reducing its potency to the Shadow Priest. Lingering Insanity, on the other hand, does not have this issue. It provides a haste bonus every time you drop out of Void form, which only speeds up the process of getting back into Void form, and on top of that, remains until its stacks run out, regardless of you being in Void form or not. This translates to a DPS increase that Void Torrent simply cannot provide, as it does not fit the current playstyle well enough to counter the benefits provided by Lingering Insanity. Even Mindbender proves to grant more DPS, as the Mindbender itself does a formidable amount of damage, as well as generating a lot more insanity than Void Torrent does, though over the duration of 12 seconds. Doing a quick test for this video, my Mindbender alone generated 78 insanity without any buffs. All in all, Void Torrent is currently the weakest of the three options by a considerable amount. Now, to get us into how Void Torrent could be fixed again, let's take a look at what the community has to say over at Discord. For this video, I asked you guys to share your opinion on the matter, saying what you like or liked about Void Torrent and what you think the problem currently is. Void stated the following: I found Void Torrent very enjoyable to use in Legion, as the stop to the insanity drain allowed us to gain more stacks in Void form, and it was a shame to see it go, as it played a big part in our rotation. The talent lineup now makes it harder for us to use in BFA rather than in Legion, because in Legion it was just there without any discouragement to not use it, so it allowed us to pick talents that we wanted to use and not stick to basically the same talents for each and every fight, and that honestly makes perfect sense, and I couldn't agree more. Nori says that she liked that it stopped the drain and allowed us to gain more stacks, also being an artifact ability, so again baseline in Legion, which allowed us to pick other talents. Raz says, I love the graphics, and seeing your numbers spike up was always satisfying. That is actually very true. But I found it super frustrating that you had to channel so people could interrupt or any movement would mess up everything, and unfortunately, of course, that is still the case. It was especially satisfying when it lined up with the legendary ring. I think it's called Cephas, and yes, you are right, it is actually called Cephas' Secret. Hazy, a very active Discord user on our server, says, the problem with Void Torrent isn't the ability as such, It's the changing game plan from Legion to BFA. We now no longer get any real tangible benefit like we did with Mass Hysteria. In Battle for Azeroth, it's all about having higher uptime on Void Form instead of longer Void Forms, and I think that principle alone has destroyed the ability. It's also unfortunately up against Lingering Insanity, which of course helps with the new fundamental of higher Void Form uptime. Of course, thank you all for sending me your opinions, and from these statements we can definitely take away that Void Torrent just feels too clunky at the moment and does not fit the playstyle of Battle for Azeroth's Shadow Priest at all. The most obvious solution is actually not a solution at all, and that is to make Void Torrent baseline again. Making Void Torrent baseline with the playstyle of the current Shadow Priest would most likely be incredibly strong and could especially become a problem the more gear and the more stats we get. Another plausible option is to reduce Void Torrent's cooldown to 40 seconds rather than 45 seconds. This will give enough breathing room to the cooldown to weave into our Void Form and won't make the ability feel like a forced cooldown when we use it. Increasing the insanity gain which Void Torrent grants us would be kind of a cheap fix in my opinion, as this would not solve the fact that it does not fit the playstyle. Personally, I'm a proponent of reducing Void Torrent's cooldown just by a little. 40 seconds gives good Shadow Priests an option to use Void Torrent at the end of every Void Form if they are able to reach about 30 stacks of Void Form. Shadow Priests who do not reach this amount of stacks can still benefit from Void Torrent, as they can simply use it at the beginning of a Void Form and should have it ready again at the beginning of the next one, or of course a few seconds after entering it. What do you think though? Would you like to see Void Torrent making a comeback? Do you enjoy the current playstyle with Void Torrent? Be sure to share your thoughts with us and tell us why you think what you think. If you would like to join the discussion, be sure to join our Discord server, and if you'd like to stay updated on the content of this channel, feel free to subscribe. If you enjoyed this video specifically, a like would go a very long way, and of course with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.